1 year on from the fatal gang rape of a student in India, campaigners mark the anniversary of a particularly brutal crime that shook the nation and the world. But has it changed attitudes towards women in a land that has long favoured its sons? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sohail Rahman. It was a savage sexual assault at the hands of 6 men carried out on a bus. The rape of a 23-year-old woman who died from her appalling injuries 13 days after her terrifying ordeal in India's capital, New Delhi. It was an assault, prosecutors said, that shocked India's collective conscience, setting in motion nationwide protests and a lot of soul-searching about the treatment of women. Women's groups spoke out about what they call a rape epidemic and a widespread sense of impunity. 4 of those convicted were later sentenced to death by hanging 12 months on, and vigils have been held across New Delhi to mark the first anniversary and the gang rape and the murder. Campaigners, rights activists and supporters prayed and lit candles. The government has responded by passing tougher laws for rape, a minimum 20-year sentence, and has introduced fast-track courts in the capital. But with police saying a rape is reported somewhere in the country every 20 minutes, it gives an idea of the sheer scale of the task at hand. But is progress being made?
I don't think there's been any considerable changes as far as girls' safety is concerned, because rapes are still happening. We still face harassment in forms of lewd comments when we are walking on the roads.
I'm here today because I have a mother, a sister-in-law, a girlfriend who are not safe. In the days to come, my wife-to-be will not be safe, and neither will my future daughter. Because in this country where a rape occurs every 20 minutes, no woman can be safe.
Today we feel scared to even talk to a girl. Such is the condition right now. Now I feel none of us is going to employ a female secretary, because God forbids. If such a complaint is logged against us, we would be imprisoned.
We are not in favor of this bill. We talk about the safety and security of women, but the way the bill has included stalking, staring and other small crimes to be punishable as non-bailable offences, it seems that the society is being divided by them.
Well, let's bring in our guests for the programme. In New Delhi, we have Sehjo Singh, Director of Programmes and Policy at ActionAid India. Joining us from Johannesburg is Srila Roy, a lecturer in sociology at the University of Nottingham and author of books on gender violence. And also in the Indian capital is Rajeev Awasthi, a lawyer in India's Supreme and High Courts. Thanks so much for joining us on Inside Story. If I could come to you first, Sehjo Singh, if you can just take your ActionAid hat off just for a moment. As a woman and a member of the public in India's capital, do you feel safe as a woman when you walk on the pavements or travel on the metro?
In Delhi, we have been raised with a conditioning that we have to protect ourselves. We developed our instincts to look into dark corners, and when we were younger, we were instructed to come back before dark. Of course, one has pushed limits. One has joined protests, one has become competent and confident to handle difficult times. But yeah, I would say that, yeah, barring some places, I would say that one has, I do not feel so unsafe in traveling in buses or walking anymore. I have developed confidence in the people around me, not so much in the security forces, but in the people around me.
Well, with that in mind, and with what's gone on certainly across India in the last 12 months, let me just very quickly ask you, and if you can give me a briefer answer, we can get to our other guests. I mean, what lessons have been learnt by society as a whole, and what are people that speak to you on a daily basis saying about the situation when it comes to women's safety?
I would say what has happened is that the people have come out on the streets. People who had never come before in any protest have come out because the bar or the tolerance or the threshold of tolerance that was there before, I think, has been lowered. And there has been an expression of that this cannot go on. And I think that is what is now contributing to women like me or even younger women starting to feel a little more confident that they can protest against harassment inside homes, outside in public places, and they expect that people would understand and would support.
Okay, well, let's bring in Mr. Awasthi, also in New Delhi. You fight such cases across the High Court and Supreme Court, sir. How important was the Justice Verma deliberations and report? He was commissioned by the government to look at the way violence against women was perpetrated and perhaps look at changes in the law to protect them. What's your opinion of how that's been implemented?
First of all, I would like to tell you that there is quite a number of developments after this particular gruesome incident. And not only administration as well as judiciary has also shown its anger, its reaction to the entire incident. And thereafter, there are a large number of amendments in the provisions of IPC, that is called Indian Penal Code, and the stricter punishment has been prescribed now, resulting which there is a lot of awareness among the common man also, and the trial is going very fast these days. And in this particular case, in a year, the entire trial concluded, and the death penalty was awarded to one of the convicts. So what I'm trying to tell you is that basically it progresses very fast as far as serious and nature offences are concerned. And judiciary has really come forward where they have established the fast-track courts and with clear mandate to the judicial officers that these trials such as rape, etc., should be tried at the best, at the expeditious possible way, so the justice could be done to the victims.
Okay, let's just give our viewers a few more facts and figures so we can move the debate on, because one of the hopes is that the publicity from this will embolden women to speak out. As such, police say they expect to see a rise in the number of reported cases, something borne out by the National Crime Records Bureau. It says the number of reported rapes almost doubled from 706 in 2012 to 1,330 in the first 9 months of this year. The cases of sexual assault quadrupled in the same period to 2,844. And if you look further back, reported cases of rape rose by more than 50% between 2001 and 2012. But conviction rates dropped from 41% to 24%. Srila Roy in Johannesburg, how does India then compare to other countries in the world, if you perhaps want to compare them to developed countries, but also within the developing world, and the way laws sometimes take a very long time to implement on the ground?
Well, I think after the Delhi rape case, there was a tendency, to exceptionalize rape that was happening in India, but also to talk of it as a specifically Indian problem. So I remember looking at a lot of the reportage in the international media, which seemed to present it as a uniquely Indian problem, a problem of Indian culture, and then, question why are Indian men raping Indian women. And obviously that's a very dangerous discourse, because we all know that, violence against women is a global phenomena. It's prevalent in developed countries just as it's prevalent in developing countries. So what I would say is that it isn't exceptional to the Indian context, but in every context, whether developed or developing, whether in India or indeed here in South Africa, where I'm speaking from, there are certain unique factors in the way in which violence against women manifests itself, and therefore the response has to be also fairly localized. So in India, for instance, caste plays quite an important role in our understanding of violence against women, to the extent that rape is often used as a mode of asserting caste power, and putting women of low caste in their place. So you have to understand violence against women in terms of those specificities. And
it seems to contradict also the, perhaps,
and I think
if I can just interrupt, it also seems to contradict the way people sometimes think about India, is that we are so respectful of the senior females within the family because of the way the family congregates around women. And yet if I could just go back just 40 years, it's great to have technology, isn't it, where we can have all these statistics. Yet 40 years ago in India in 1972, a young, low caste girl called Mathura was raped. That caused wide public outrage across India. Yes. The case against 2 police officers that apparently raped her was then overturned. They were freed, and yet the protests for her justice continued into the 1980s. What didn't India learn from that particular scenario when there was actually a female prime minister at the helm?
Yes, and indeed, you know, the Mathura rape case is seen as, you know, as actually the kind of the fire that sort of started the post-independence women's movement, at least that phase of it. And actually, I mean, it's really important that you bring that into this conversation, because there is a way in which we look at the protests that we've seen post the Delhi rape case through this year as unprecedented. But actually, this is a country that has had a long-standing women's movement and mobilization around violence against women, which has always been the major issue of the of mobilization. So I think it's an important corrective, and not to. I mean, of course, you know, I'm not minimizing the protests that we saw, which were unprecedented in certain ways. But it's also, you know, one also needs to remember that it builds on years of mobilizing and campaigning, which have together contributed to the important discursive shifts that we see today. You know, the shifts in conversation, the mainstreaming of women's issues. You know, all of that hasn't just happened in the last year. It's cumulative over a really long period, and thanks to the women's movement.
Well, let me just bring in Ms. Singh. I think you want to say something about this particular historic case and how it impacts on what we've seen this last 12 months.
You know, I couldn't agree more about the understanding about how the multiple vulnerabilities of caste and tribe, and not forgetting the large Muslim minority, the women, Muslim women have suffered in various riots, etc. But what I want to again point out is that Delhi and the entire protest should not create the framework of the kind of questions that you asked me. For example, how safe do you feel? You know, that is a very
But why shouldn't I ask that question? Ma'am, why shouldn't I ask that question?
I'll tell you why.
Let me just clarify that and quantify it, because in the last 12 months, we've had at least 2 foreign tourists, for example, that have been raped in Madhya Pradesh, and I think also in Mumbai. Now, when you have those international incidents happening, inevitably tourists, the outside world, is going to say, is India not safe? It is a genuine question that people will ask. I think it was a very honest question for me to ask, and you gave me a very honest answer.
Sure. But I mean, you could ask similar question on the streets of New York, whether you mugged or not. And for instance, in Johannesburg, I was not even let out of the hotel by my hosts, because they felt that even if I was to walk the street there, it was unsafe. In Rio, I was not allowed out by myself. I'm a grown-up 50-year-old woman, because that, you know, so I think what our friend from Johannesburg has said very correctly, that, you know, isolating and questioning, and that is what I am requesting the people from media, and media has been a huge support to this women's movement and this protest, is by celebrating the exceptional protests right now which are happening, and standing with people of Delhi in solidarity, and heightening the fact that here is the fact that people have come out, and not just women's movement, it is people who are not activists, people who have not yet ever participated in any protest. So celebrating the fact that now very ordinary families thought that this was worth their while to come out in the cold and protest. So therefore, I think what should be marked is very rightly pointed out that this is a victory of women's movement, which has been working dedicatedly since the 1970s. And you very correctly said that Mathura case, Mathura was a tribal girl who was raped in the police station by 2 policemen. It was a historic moment, and I still remember as a young girl growing up, that was the first time that the law was changed and the onus of proof was shifted from the woman to the perpetrator, the criminal. And that was a very historic moment.
Let's fast forward then to present day, and Mr. Awasthi, let me come back to you in New Delhi. The law has been tightened, according to yourselves, and by government. The police have more powers to inquire, investigate, interview and arrest, and yet there are 23,000 cases pending in front of the High Courts over issues of rape and sexual assault. Something is not happening. There is a problem. across the country?
No, yes, there are two things which we should not forget about this. Number one, that now the Supreme Court has given clear guidelines in 2013, 2012 also, that once there is a case reported, you must register an FIR. And therefore, this increase in number is, number one, because of this. Number two, because now the women have become more bold, and because of education and other social commandments and the support from the public, they started coming large in number wherever they are feeling uncomfortable or they face such kind of a situation. Now, the Supreme Court has also recently framed guideline that is called Vishaka's case, very famous case, that sexual harassment at the workplace. So all these awareness which has resulted in coming up all these cases freshly, because earlier women was hesitant to come out and report. Now, because of education and quality of life, they have, with the public support also, they are coming freely and reporting such cases. Now, as far as pendency is concerned, we cannot forget that the Indian population and ratio of judicial available system. Now, we have around 1 judge against 10 lakh people. So therefore, once the cases are being registered, they are to be tried. Therefore, Supreme Court has made clear guideline wherever there are seriousness in the offence, it should be tried by the fast track court. These are all innovative process which will take little time to clear the pendency. But judiciary and the government both are taking number of steps by which such situation could be avoided and the victims get the justice as fast as possible.
Okay. Srila Roy in Johannesburg, would you agree with that in the sense that India is doing the best that it can, but also raises questions about how justice can be seen to be done both in perhaps urban areas as well as rural areas?
Well, I have to say I'm not so optimistic. I mean, if at all, I think any changes have happened, it's happened from the bottom up rather than top down. I mean, I think the fact that, you know, more women are coming out and there are greater numbers of reported rape cases and women are actually empowered to not only report cases, but, you know, there has been instances of women actually coming out, naming themselves as not victims, but as survivors of rape and sexual violence. I mean, I think this is because there has been this kind of momentous shift as a result of the protests after the Delhi rape, where we saw a shift from discourses of, you know, izzat or honor, dishonor, shame and protection associated with violence against women to an assertion of freedom, rights and equality. And I think that is what has created a culture of enabling women to name sexual violence and to name perpetrators, whether they're in positions of privilege and power, as we saw in the recent Tehelka case, or whether they're you know, on the margins of society, and even more harder, you know, when it's people who are familiar in the comforts of homes and communities, which, as we know, you know, the greater number of crimes against women take place. So for me, these changes have happened on the ground, but for me, the political class is still responding very much in the same manner. I mean, after the rape case that took place of a 22-year-old photojournalist in Mumbai, you still had members of the political class recommending that working women should be chaperoned when they go out to work after dark. So that's still a very protectionist and patriarchal way of thinking about the whole issue. And the most disappointing thing that's recently happened, of course, is the Supreme Court's upholding of Section 377, which criminalizes not just homosexuality, but criminalizes sexual acts against nature. And I think feminists in India are precisely the ones who are making this connection by saying this is a way of upholding the patriarchal heteronormative family.
Well, let me just bring
narrowing,
in,
you know,
because Ms. Singh, no, I'm not trying to interrupt, but I have to, unfortunately, because Ms. Singh is also nodding, and it actually brings me to my next question, which is the basic status of women has increased, their strength and confidence in being part and equal members of the Indian society led one psychiatrist, and I'm going to quote her, Purnima Nagarjar, says, "It's the status of women rising in society seen as a threat. Are women seen as a threat when they become more independent, become more educated, want to go out to work, and therefore so in some cases we're seeing men attack women, as it's been said, because they want to control them and show them who's boss, so to speak. And this is a point raised by not just this psychiatrist, but many others as well." Ms. Singh.
I would not individualize it. You see, I think especially in societies like India, where rape is definitely a form of oppression, of threatening women to remain within the patriarchal boundaries of the family, but it is as much a threat against these minority communities or weaker communities, that rape is employed as a weapon of oppression. So what I would see is that, and this is what ActionAid is working on, is to make the connections between all kinds of oppression, you know, of the marginalized people, and bringing the feminist discourse about, you know, building resistance from the bottom. And therefore, I think women's rights is an immensely important start, where all communities cutting across can start questioning the forms of oppression from below.
Sure.
And what we are very, very hopeful about is that other forms of empowerment, like you're talking about, you know, men resisting, women being empowered. You could see this a similar story when women, about thousands of women who have become powerful as the members of the village councils. They're called Panch and Sarpanch, the head people of village councils, and the kind of change that they have engendered at the lowest possible level.
Well, doesn't that also,
that is resisted not just by men,
if I just come in there, both for you and Ms. Roy, doesn't that also mean, and I spoke to an advocate very recently in Delhi about this particular topic and subject, Ms. Roy, she was saying that if you're going to change attitudes, you have to start in the home. The conversation has to start with the family, and making sure that male members of the family talk about equality of female members, regardless of what their class and status is.
Yes, of course, because you know, I mean, that's when often inequality, discrimination, and indeed violence lies. And what makes it so difficult to name violence in that context is because, you know, the family is a safe space. So one has very clear-cut distinctions of, you know, what are safe spaces and what are unsafe spaces. So the public sphere is posited as an unsafe space where, you know, women shouldn't go out in the dark, and where they have to be constrained in a certain way. But because the family, in contrast, is configured as a space of safety, of familiarity, of indeed love and comfort, it becomes much more difficult to name violence in that context. On top of that, you know, we have a very strong discourse around family honor and shame. And, you know, and here various patriarchies act in cahoot. So you will have, you know, the police telling you not to name family members as perpetrators of violence because that goes against family honor, as well as family elders. So you see there are multiple patriarchies that are work together to silence women, and that's where you also need a shift. You know, you need a cultural shift where women are empowered to talk back to violence wherever it occurs. And that has, I mean, I think that we are seeing, you know, a bit of those shifts. I mean, for instance, the photojournalist I mentioned, it was quite striking that her family really stood by her, and that was, you know, that was a huge part of at least the media coverage of the story, and that's very encouraging.
Well, very quickly, Mr. Awasthi, in New Delhi, within the Justice Verma report, there were some omissions: rape within marriage, the reduction of the age of consent, and some armed personnel from the military services exempt from being charged with acts of violence against women. Do you think those laws have to be looked at when we come to a new parliament after a new general election in 2014? Very quickly, sir.
In Delhi, women are very secure, safe, in the senses these are incidents which are stray incidents, and which cannot branded like that every woman is unsafe in Delhi. Okay. And life is going on up to 12 o'clock. People are working here, women are working here, and they feel safe. Okay. Yes, of course, the incident has really opened the eye, and will definitely, laws are changing and more stringent law will come to protect the women's right.
Well, we shall see what does happen on this subject. It's certainly not going away in India or certainly across the world. But for the moment, I'd like to thank my guests, Sehjo Singh, Srila Roy and Rajeev Awasthi. And thank you for your company as well. A reminder that you can find this programme and many more at aljazeera.com. Just follow the links for shows and Inside Story. I'm Sohail Rahman. You're watching Inside Story. Thanks so much for your time and your company.